life. It's quite fascinating, and I think he's one of the great figures of history, and certainly of political thought. He's an Italian, he's a historian, he was also a politician, he was a diplomat, he was a philosopher, a humanist, and he was a writer. He was based in Florence during the Renaissance. You can say that he is the prototype of the modern empirical scientist, or rather the social scientist. In fact, many people can consider that modern political science really begins with Machiavelli. Why is it that we consider him so important? We consider him important because he emancipated, he separated the study of politics from theology. The study of politics was no longer a theological question. It was no longer about whether things accorded with Christian doctrines or not. It was no longer about whether things even accorded with what is right or wrong, what is morally right or wrong were concerned. He doesn't care कि अच्छा क्या है बुरा क्या है. He cares कि politics में चलता क्या है. What is effective in politics? How does politics actually work? Instead of trying to understand what ought to exist, like Mr. Plato, he's going to try and understand what actually exists, like Aristotle. So that's why we consider him to be a modern scientist. At the time that Machiavelli began his political career, Italy was divided into 5 powers. There was the papacy, there was Naples, Venice, Milan, and Florence. And the country was in civil war. It was being fought over by France, by Spain, and also the Holy Roman Empire, which of course is a Western empire, European empire. But in Florence itself, a very interesting family was in control called the Medici family. There's even a TV serial about them. Yeah? The Medici family. The French had invaded in 1494, and the Medicis lost power as a result of the French invasion. Then Girolamo Savonarola created a democratic period. He created a republic. We don't mean democratic in the modern sense. We mean it in that sense that there was no Bartholomew, etc. He later accused the Pope of corruption and was burnt as a heretic. Meanwhile, Machiavelli spent 14 years in diplomatic missions to shore up the struggling Florentine Republic. Machiavelli met and was impressed by Cesare Borgia, on whom he based a lot of his writing. He is one of the sources of Machiavelli's famous work, The Prince, and the other source is Pope Julius II. In 1512, the Pope won against Florence and the French. The Pope and the Spanish dissolved the Republic and installed Cardinal de Medici. And in 1513, Machiavelli was falsely implicated in a plot against the Medici family, was tortured, but survived the torture, was also fined and obviously imprisoned. When he was released a month later, he wanted to get back in the favors of the Medici family. So he wanted to present a book to Giuliano Medici, who actually passed away, and his son then, Lorenzo Medici, became the head of the family. So Machiavelli then wrote a book, wanted to write to Lorenzo, and saying to him, कि मैं आपका वफादार हूँ, मैं इटली का वफादार हूँ, ठीक है, I was with Savonarola before, but I am loyal to Italy, I am loyal to you, please give me a job. I'll be your political advisor, I can be a diplomat, I can be a politician for you, I can do lots of good things on your behalf, give me work. Now, so Machiavelli basically wrote out a CV, and with a cover letter, right? The cover letter became a very long cover letter. He wanted to tell Lorenzo what he could give Lorenzo, how he could benefit Lorenzo. So he started writing about his experiences not writing experiences, but he started drawing on his experiences. And he wrote in the beginning of this CV, okay, look, the most precious gift that I can give you is the gift of knowledge, of how to run a state. That's the most important, that's what you're doing, that's the most important thing I can give you. And so here is what I have learned over my years as a politician and as a diplomat and as a historian. I'm giving this to you. Please give me a job. Can you imagine that the job application, the cover letter he wrote, because it was a cover letter, there was no title to the cover letter. There was no title to this book at all. It was just saying, to Lorenzo the Magnificent, etc. There was no other, title of this book because it was a letter, sort of thing, very long one, 150 pages or so. That cover letter, that CV became the most influential phone call. That CV cover letter became one of the most influential works in European history. Remarkable for its achievement, especially given that it was a family. The prince, as it came to be called then, because he keeps talking about the prince. What must the prince do? What must Lorenzo do to make Italy strong? He keeps talking about that. So then later people just decided to call it the prince. It's a witty book. It's a cynical book. It set aside Christian morality and gave the ruler ruthless practical advice. Karna kya hai? Forget what's right or wrong. Karna kya hai? Machiavellian central concept of Machiavelli is virtue. By virtue he didn't mean what Plato meant, that which is good. By virtue he meant that which was power. Because virtue, the word in Italian, from Latin, is derived from power. What is it that gives power? What is it that animates things? So it is derived, it has the same root as the word virile. And you know what virile means, to be powerful. So Machiavelli can said to be the founder of the political school that we call realism. And what does realism tell you? It tells you rulers cannot and should not be bound by morality. Okay, morality is one thing. जिस तरह जब आप नमाज पढ़ने जाते हैं तो गंदे जूते आप बाहर उतार के आते हैं, इसी तरह जब सियासत के मैदान में आप आते हैं मेरे दोस्त, तो जो morality के गंदे जूते हैं वो बाहर उतार के आए. Morality doesn't matter. What matters is what he says is the ends justify the means. You can use cruel means, bad means, but if you get results, that's what's important. You have to get results. You could be a naked, nice guy, but if you don't get results, you are a flop politician. You're terrible as a prince, as a head of state, and so on. But his laws were very strange. It was only these were laws that were applicable to the prince. They were not applicable to the people. He was not saying to the people कि आप immoral हो जाएं, झूठ बोलना शुरू कर दें, ये बोल. He said नहीं, उनके लिए और rules हैं, आपके लिए और rules हैं. क्योंकि आप head of state हैं, तो आपको बहुत कुछ करना पड़ेगा जो आम बंदे को नहीं करना पड़ता. Because you are responsible for all these people. You know, you're responsible to take care of all these people. So you have to do a lot of things that they don't have to do and they should not do. However, he always warned that if you do things that make the people hate their prince, then that is very negative for you. The people must also love you, but he wanted to set up a dual morality. The prince cannot observe all these things which are considered good in men. What may be considered good in a good father, in a good husband, in a good brother, a sister, whatever, are not the same qualities of a good statesman. So you can say that Machiavelli was also very much against the concept of fate. Because the Christian doctrine at that time had taught people that if you are a good Christian, God will help you, and your fate is in God's hand, right? They said, no, it's not the way the world works. I'm sorry to inform you. Your fate is in your own hands. You make your own fate. So it was against the idea that the fortune, there's something as, क्या कहते हैं उर्दू में क्या लफ्ज़ है, तकदीर है आपकी, बस वही होना है और उसके अलावा कुछ नहीं होना. He was against teleology. There's an end world mystery, especially religious teleology, of formal or final causation. He was like, no, the future is open. You make of it what you make of it. So that's why one of the very famous sayings he has is, fortune favors the brave, the courageous. So, yeah, there's good and bad luck, but if you're courageous, you turn things into your own favor. Fate makes imaginary ideals. He encourages people to be lazy, leave events up to God, fate and fortune. If you think कि भाई तकदीर में ये लिखा यही होना है, तो फिर कुछ करने की ज़रूरत है, क्योंकि जो भी आप करोगे वही होना है जो तकदीर में लिखा है, तो कोई मेहनत करने की ज़रूरत ही नहीं. But if you believe कि you make your own destiny, then you actually act. Religion can be used as an instrument. It is instrumental. The republics need religion to keep everybody in order. But the best prince is never really religious himself. But he should make his people religious, and he should himself appear religious. कि मैं बड़ा नेकपाक हूँ, वगैरह वगैरह. But actually, the real game is quite different. The prince must have the ferocity of a lion and the cunning of a fox. The two qualities, the fox and the lion. What are they? The prince, ideal situation here that you must be loved and feared, both. Okay, imagine, forget the prince, because you have very little experience of dealing with princes or prime ministers, etc. But you can just imagine your teacher here, Taimur Rahman. Imagine if I were taking the advice of Machiavelli, or you can even amend Machiavelli's laws to understand business practices or leadership practices, leading an organization, leading a classroom discussion, etc. What must Taimur Rahman do? How must I be? I must be loved and feared at the same time. That ideal. You love me, you say, oh sir, Taimur, itne अच्छे lectures सुनाते हैं. Sir, मेरा तो दिल चाहता है कि मैं break ही ना लूँ, मैं उनके lecture ही सुनता रहूँ. And but you must also fear me. कि अगर मैंने उठ के मैं चला गया, मैंने notes ना लिए, तो sir ने मेरी बेइज्जती कर दी class में. पढ़े थे मैं notes etc. So you have to also fear me. Love and fear is important. But I shouldn't be hated. If you hate me, तो फिर तो आप जो है ना इधर मुंह बना के बैठ जाएंगे, ना आप पढ़ेंगे, कोई काम नहीं करेंगे. But the prince must also have a reputation for compassion. He must be harsh only with the few to bring social order. इसका मतलब ये कि अगर आप चीटिंग शूटिंग कर रहे हैं, जिसना अभी क्लासरूम में कई लोग थे जो नोट्स नहीं ले रहे थे, ठीक है? मैंने देखा, स्कैन द क्लासरूम, I saw कई लोग नोट्स ले रहे हैं, तो अभी तक किताब बंद करके बैठा था. मगर मैंने एक शरिया किताब भी खोल दिया. Thank you. आप मेरी क्लास में नहीं हैं. You are enrolled in the class. ये तो बड़ा ही जबरदस्त है. We need to give him a coolness medal, man. And he missed like 3 weeks of classes, and he comes and he's like, "मुच्छा बताओ लियो." सुनो कि क्या कहते हैं वो रुमान. अब देखो ना, एक बंदे की मैंने बेइज्जती की, ठीक है? मगर सारे लाइन में आ जाएंगे इसके बाद. मैं क्यों नहीं ये सिखाता है कि अभी क्या है यार उससे बॉलिंग कर दो पीस ऑफ पेपर. अगर वैसी खत्म हो गई सरकार को दरवाजा है आप आएंगे. इधर आपका नाम क्या है? अवैस. आप बहुत मेरी नाम इजी है, इतना इजी नहीं है. हंसी मजाक अपनी जगह, मगर ऐसे नहीं आप पास होने लगे. और फिर हो गए शौक है? नहीं शौक तो फिर काम करना पड़ेगा. Lesson in point Machiavelli. If I make an example out of this guy, देखना पूरे सेमेस्टर मैंने इसको वो करना है, इसका चुम्बर निकल जाएगा. इसका मैं सत्यानाश अगर कर दूंगा ना तो बाकी सारे इन लाइन हो जाएंगे. अगर मैं सबका सत्यानाश करूंगा ना तो सारे मेरे खराब हो जाएंगे. ठीक है ना? आपने भी नोट नहीं पकड़े हुए, पकड़ो. क्यों नहीं नोट्स ले रहे? देखो ये बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट चीज़ है, इससे मस्कुलर मेमोरी पैदा होती है. When you take notes, you remember things in a way that you will not remember if you just listen to my lecture. इस तरह तो गुफ्तगू निशिस्तन बर्खास्तन वाला मामला होता है, जैसा टीवी देख रहे होते हैं. But when you take notes, that's when it gets in your brain. Okay? What are you, senior or junior? देखा ना मैंने कहा. Classic case. Classic case. This is how we जो जिसको कहते हैं ना पावलोवियन कंडीशनिंग, पता क्या होती है? पावलोवियन कंडीशनिंग ये होती है कि मैं कुत्ते को मीट फेंकूं, फिर उसके बाद बैठ जाता हूँ. टोंग. तो वो मीट खाता है, जब वो मीट को देखता है तो his mouth salivates. फिर मैं अगले दिन ये कहूँगा टोंग, अगले दिन ये कहूँगा टोंग. एक दिन मैं मीट फेंकने के बजाय वैसे ही टाउन कर दूंगा, वो कुत्ता सैलिवेट करना शुरू कर देगा, बिकॉज ही इज एक्सपेक्टिंग मीट. इसका भी यही हाल है कि नॉट दैट इज अ डॉग, but that he's been so institutionalized and conditioned that now he thinks he's the coolest dude who's ever been born. I mean, he studied 3 years at LUMS. Oh my God, why do I need to listen to this guy who studied 36 years and got a PhD and so on? Who is he, man? I studied 3 years at LUMS. He called कबूतर आ गया. So ये हम पैदा कर रहे हैं लोगों को, क्या करें? So what the prince must do is कि एक बंदे को ले और उसकी मिसाल बना दे. भाई जरा पानी में अभी भी आप गेट हो रहे. क्या नाम है आपका? अवैस. आ जाओ. तुम रात कर रहा हूँ यार, मैं कह रहा हूँ पेपर पेन पकड़ो. हाँ ये ठीक है. थोड़ी सी बेइज्जती करनी पड़ेगी मुझे, says Machiavelli. क्यों? क्योंकि if I am harsh with one person, then the others will also learn their lesson. But if I let him go and I let you go, or if I punish you all, तो फिर क्या होगा? उलट रिएक्शन हो जाएगा मेरे खिलाफ. लोग कहेंगे कि सर ने बहुत ज़्यादा सख्ती कर दी. So that's what he teaches. अच्छा, by the way, when I teach this course, every philosopher that I teach, I'll be implementing their philosophy in class. So right now I'm Machiavelli, or rather I'm the prince that Machiavelli wants me to be. When I teach Aristotle, you'll see I was very pro Aristotle, even trying to defend his horrible sexism. When I was teaching Plato, I was being very pro Plato and trying to be like Plato, etc. So what the teacher needs is a ferocity of the lion to frighten those who seek to dispose of him. जो पढ़ते नहीं हैं, वो मुझसे डरें, मेरी इब्रत से डरें. But I also must have the cunning of the fox to recognize your traps, to understand कि कभी कभार आप मुझे जानबूझ के जिन्हें ट्रिप अप करने की कोशिश करते हैं, ताकि मैं कोई उलट-पुलट हरकत कर सकूं. So I need to have both qualities, cunning as well as courage. So what that means is that the lion is unafraid of battle. He charges into any opposition, with his roaring like a lion. But the fox never charges into a battle. Never. The fox is a brilliant animal at evading traps. None of us have ever probably seen a fox or been on a fox hunt. But a fox hunt is exciting for the people who are hunting the poor fox, because the fox is so smart. It can zip around like so quickly that it can evade. वो घोड़ों पे चढ़ के 50 बंदा जो एक फॉक्स को पकड़ने की कोशिश कर रहा होता है, और वो फॉक्स कभी जिंग 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 जाता है, और वो ट्रैप में गिरता ही नहीं. बड़ा मुश्किल होता है उसको पकड़ना. So that's what he's saying. You don't always charge at your opponent. Where you are weak and you know you will be defeated, you break your promise. You retreat. You withdraw. You find another way to come back. But where you are strong, you charge like a lion, destroy it. Where it benefits you, you must charge, and where it doesn't benefit you, you must be evade like a fox. He said, कभी कभार brute force इस्तेमाल करनी पड़ती है. सर उड़ा दो, गिटार उड़ा दो, draw and quarter कर दो, फांसी लगा दो. करना पड़ता है किसी head of state को, ताकि बंदे का पुत्र बने लो. Or he can also use deceit for stabilization of power and introduction of new legal institutions. He can always say, he can lie. Even the public, he can say कि नहीं कोई मसला नहीं है, सब ठीक है, क्या नाम है, there's no enemy across the border, there's no big fight, etc., etc. We're dealing with it, there's no problem. छोटा सा मसला. Maybe there's an entire army sitting over there, people are terrified, but he must have the ability to not necessarily always tell the truth. He must have the force to eliminate political rivals, to coerce resistant populations, and to remove competitors from power. So this is not your typical democrat. It's your wily political operator who understands that, yeah, it sounds really good in theory to have lots of opposition and so on and so forth, but in practice, you've got to remove opposition to solidify your state. But you have to do that smartly. You can't just do that in an idiotic kind of way. In his book called Discourses on the 10 Books of Titus Livy, Titus Livy again is a Roman ruler. The prince doesn't represent M's own, that is Machiavelli's own views. In fact, you discover that in this book, Machiavelli says some very different things. He says there's a big disjuncture between what Machiavelli writes in The Prince and what he writes in Discourses. Discourses argues the republic is the ideal regime. The concept, it argues for the concept of checks and balances and divisions of power. But a prince is only suitable when equality does not exist in a state. It is sometimes a necessary evil. So it's not saying this is what the prince is doing is the ideal situation. But we live in a world which is not ideal. If we lived in a world that was ideal, we have checks and balances, and that's what we want in the end. But to get there, you have to be smart. Many people think the prince might have been satire. He might have actually held the exact opposite views. This is very interesting. The reason why people say that is because Machiavelli wrote his book in the native Italian rather than in the Latin that was the international language of Europe at the time. And the Italian was a language that people in Italy read. The elite did not. The elite read Latin. So it meant that his audience perhaps could have been the people. Now imagine if I wrote a book dedicated to Nawaz Sharif on how to deceive the people, how you must lie, cheat, and do this and that and the other. And I wrote it in Punjabi, Urdu, etc. And the people read it and said, if these are our rulers, if these are the methods that they use, to hell with these rulers, let's create a republic. So there's also this interesting conspiracy theory about Machiavelli. The response of the prince was massive. First, yes?
The book wasn't meant for the people, was it? It was meant for the hands of
It was, but then of course it did get printed and did get go to people, etc. as well. It was initially meant for pluralism. I think that my personal view, I thought I should mention it just as a fun fact, but my personal view is that that's not the case, that the conspiracy theory is not correct. My personal view is that he wrote in Italian because his main focus was Italian nationalism. You could say that he was a very strong Italian nationalist. He wanted the 5 states of Italy to unite. He wanted a strong Italian state. That was his primary thing. Everything good and bad was judged by whether or not Italy would manage to unite, beat away France, Spain, etc., and become an independent state. Everything was judged on that equation. If you had to lie, cheat, you had to kill some people to make Italy a powerful state and to get rid of the invaders, that's fine by me, he said that. That's what he really wanted. And so I think the reason why he wrote it in Italian is because of the development of, as I see it, Italian nationalist views. And of course, humanist philosophy already was of the view, as I told you with Erasmus, that the Bible should be translated into local vernaculars and so on. So Machiavelli was only following Erasmus's advice by writing in Italian. So, so the church was very upset with this. As you can see, he wasn't teaching morality, he was teaching the art of politics. And they placed his book on the Librarium Prohibitorium, which is basically prohibited books in the library. Machiavellianism is a negative term in the world today. It characterizes unscrupulous politicians. Machiavelli seems to be endorsing behavior often deemed immoral. Humanists oppose it because Machiavelli was self-consciously, they called him a teacher of evil. But the important thing is he makes a fundamental break from idealism to look at reality as it actually exists. And I think in doing so, he sets the foundation for true political science rather than political morals. Many people continue to regard Machiavelli as an arch-daddy, but Russell says the world has become more like that of Machiavelli. But I think that perhaps is not necessarily the right statement. Here's one interesting thing. In what is the Catholic world, like England, etc., even America, etc., where religious organizations are especially strong, there Machiavelli is regarded in this way that you and I perceive him, okay, he's evil. But in Italy itself, they love Machiavelli. They have statues of Machiavelli. Today, they consider him one of the great Italian thinkers that really is responsible for the eventual birth and development of modern Italy, becoming a powerful and strong state, etc. Developing the ideas of the Renaissance into the realm of politics and explaining how politics actually works rather than how people think it works. Okay, so any questions? We can stop now. Any questions?